It was a quiet morning in the small town of Pinneville when Sarah, a young woman in her early 30s, was rushed to the hospital. She had been feeling strange for weeks, something that doctors had initially brushed off as stress from a busy life. But now, as her water broke unexpectedly, it became clear that something incredible was about to happen. Sarah had been expecting her third child, but nothing could have prepared her for what was coming. She had no idea that her life would soon change in a way that no one, including the doctors, could have predicted. As Sarah lay in the hospital bed, her heart raced. She was anxious, excited, and even a bit scared. It was hard to calm her nerves, especially with the strange sensation she felt growing inside her. The doctors had told her that her pregnancy was progressing normally, but Sarah had no idea that what was happening to her body was far from ordinary. The nurses rushed in as Sarah's contractions grew stronger. Her husband, Michael, stood by her side, holding her hand, trying to comfort her. But he, too, was nervous. It had been a stressful few months for the couple, and now, with the unexpected rush to the hospital, it felt like everything was happening at once. Sarah's family had always been close, and this was supposed to be the joyous occasion they had all been waiting for. But soon, the peaceful hospital room was filled with tension as Sarah began to experience an overwhelming sense of pressure. The nurse glanced at the doctor, her eyes widening. Something wasn't right. This wasn't just a regular delivery. The doctor quickly took charge, instructing the nurses to prepare for an emergency. Sarah's labor wasn't just progressing. It was escalating rapidly, far faster than anyone had anticipated. The doctor's calm voice echoed in the room as he instructed the team to prepare for multiple births. "Get ready. We could be dealing with more than one," he said, trying to keep Sarah calm despite the overwhelming situation. Sarah's eyes widened in disbelief, but before she could ask questions, the doctor turned to her and said, "Don't worry, Sarah. We're here to make sure you and your babies are safe." The moments that followed were a blur. Sarah felt the sharp, excruciating pain of labor, but her mind was clouded with the confusion of what was happening. In the background, the sound of machines and frantic footsteps filled the air. Nurses moved quickly, preparing for what was about to happen, but they had no idea that they were about to witness something miraculous. Then the moment arrived. Sarah felt an overwhelming sense of relief as the first baby was born. She could hear the faint cries of the newborn. And for a moment, her world slowed down. Her heart swelled with joy. But just as quickly, the doctor's voice brought her back to reality. "Here comes baby number 2, the doctor said calmly, though his voice was filled with awe. It wasn't just one baby. It was 2. And then, the next few moments became a whirlwind. Baby 3, 4, and 5 followed rapidly, each one taking the nurses by surprise as the doctor worked swiftly to make sure everything was in order. Sarah was in shock. How was this even possible? 5 babies. She had only prepared for 1. But the shock didn't end there. As the 5th baby was born, the doctor stood still for a moment, his expression unreadable. Sarah's eyes searched his face, her breath caught in her chest. And then, the doctor spoke the words that would change their lives forever. "Sarah, you've just had 6 babies." The room fell silent. 6 babies. Sarah's mind couldn't comprehend it. She had given birth to 6 healthy black children in one go. The world around her seemed to stop, the noise of the hospital muffled by the rush of blood in her ears. Michael was speechless, staring at the babies, and then at Sarah, his eyes filled with wonder. 6? He whispered, as if he too needed to hear it again to believe it. The nurse stepped forward, her hands trembling as she helped Sarah sit up slightly, so she could get a glimpse of her 6 newborns. They were all perfectly healthy, wrapped snugly in soft white blankets. Their little faces, so fragile and delicate, were a mixture of Sarah's features and something entirely new, something completely remarkable. Sarah gazed at them, the weight of the moment sinking in, and tears welled up in her eyes. The moment was surreal. She had just become the mother of 6. The news spread like wildfire. The small town of Pennville had never seen anything like it. News reporters, curious onlookers, and well-wishers flooded the hospital, all eager to see the mother of 6 children, born at once. But for Sarah, it was still sinking in. She looked at each of her babies with a sense of awe and disbelief. As the day turned into night, the hospital room became a sanctuary for Sarah and her children. Despite the media frenzy outside, all she could think about was how incredible it was to be holding 6 little lives in her arms. 6 tiny hearts, all beating at once, all connected to her. It was the beginning of an incredible journey, one that no one could have ever anticipated. And for Sarah, this journey would change everything. She had 6 children, and her life was now tied to their futures in ways she couldn't yet understand. The road ahead would be long, but Sarah knew one thing for sure. It would be a journey filled with love, surprises, and miracles. Sarah's world had shifted dramatically in the days following the birth of her 6 children. What should have been a moment of pure joy had turned into an exhausting, overwhelming whirlwind of emotions. The moment the hospital room became quiet and the excitement died down, Sarah was left to face a reality she hadn't fully prepared for. 6 newborns, 6 lives depending on her. 6 tiny souls she had to nurture, protect, and love. In the early days, Sarah felt as if she was living in a blur. The constant hum of hospital machinery, the soft cries of her babies, and the frantic calls from well-wishers made it all feel like a dream. But it wasn't a dream. It was her life now. The first few nights at home were the hardest. She and Michael had transformed their living room into a temporary nursery, with bassinets and cribs lined up in rows. At first, it felt like a beautiful dream, having her babies all together, so perfect and fragile. But as the days passed, the reality of her situation became painfully clear. Sarah was exhausted, overwhelmed, and alone in a way she had never felt before. Each of her babies had their own unique needs. One of them, Samuel, was always fussy and needed constant soothing. Another, Olivia, would sleep for hours, but when she woke, it was always at the same time as her siblings. Then there was little Noah, who had trouble feeding, often leaving Sarah in tears, feeling helpless. The rest of the babies were mostly calm, but keeping them all on a schedule was a battle she never seemed to win. The physical toll on Sarah's body was unimaginable. While she had given birth to 6 children, her body had been through far more than any woman could reasonably endure. There were times when her muscles ached from carrying the babies or rocking them to sleep. Her back felt as if it was constantly on fire, and the sleep she so desperately needed was nothing more than a distant memory. Michael, too, was struggling. Though he loved his children deeply, the weight of the situation was crushing. He had to work long hours to provide for the family, leaving Sarah to handle most of the baby care alone during the day. His guilt was palpable. He wanted to be there for Sarah, but the financial pressure weighed heavily on him. It wasn't just the stress of the bills and the mortgage. It was the quiet realization that there was never enough time to be with his family. The couple found themselves at odds more than once, their once strong bond beginning to crack under the pressure. The sleepless nights, constant crying, and never-ending demands of 6 babies were pushing them to the brink. They were emotionally and physically drained. There were moments when Sarah would collapse in tears, and Michael would hold her, wishing he could do more. But no words could fix the exhaustion that had taken root in their lives. The financial strain was another burden they weren't prepared for. Having 6 babies meant constant trips to the pediatrician, diapers, formula, and every other essential they hadn't anticipated needing in such large quantities. Sarah had to get creative with budgeting, often sacrificing her own needs for the sake of the children. The couple wasn't wealthy, and the cost of raising 6 babies at once was quickly draining their savings. Sarah had always been the kind of woman who could manage anything life threw at her. She prided herself on being resourceful and strong. But this was different. No matter how hard she tried, the days seemed endless, and the nights were even worse. She felt like she was losing herself in the process of being a mother to 6 children. The old Sarah, The woman who used to go out with friends, pursue hobbies, and take care of herself, seemed like a distant memory. The constant pressure was taking a toll on her mental health too. She found herself feeling overwhelmed with guilt whenever she couldn't meet the needs of her children, or when she had to ask for help. She felt like she wasn't enough, like a failure. She would often have moments of self-doubt, wondering if she was truly cut out for this. Her own identity seemed to be slipping away as she became known only as the mother of 6. One night, as she lay awake, staring at the ceiling, she couldn't hold it in anymore. The tears came, not just from exhaustion, but from the overwhelming weight of it all. Sarah had always prided herself on being strong, but in that moment, she realized that she didn't have to be perfect. She didn't have to do it all alone. It was okay to ask for help. It was okay to not have it all figured out. And most importantly, it was okay to cry. That night, Michael stayed home from work, and the two of them sat together, talking about the future. They discussed hiring a nurse to help with the babies, even if it was just a few hours a week. They decided to lean on their families more, asking for help with the kids when needed. Most importantly, they talked about their love for each other and their commitment to getting through this, no matter how hard it was. It wasn't easy. Every day brought new challenges. But in that moment, Sarah realized something important. This was their journey, and while it was tough, it was also beautiful. Every time she looked at her 6 children, she was reminded of the strength that lay within her and her family. It was hard, yes, but love, she realized, was stronger than anything else. The struggles weren't over, but Sarah's resolve had never been clearer. She was going to give everything she had for her children, for her family, and she would keep going, one day at a time. It had been 27 years since Sarah gave birth to her 6 beautiful children, and though time had passed, the memory of that miraculous day remained vivid in her heart. Her babies, once so small and fragile, had grown into strong, independent adults. Each of them had their own unique personality, dreams, and ambitions. But even after all these years, one thing remained constant: the bond they shared as a family. The unbreakable connection that started the moment they were born. Life had not been easy for Sarah and Michael. The early years were filled with struggle, exhaustion, and uncertainty, but they had made it through. With hard work, love, and support from their family and friends, they had created a life that was filled with joy and pride. Their children were a testament to their perseverance and love. But now, all those years later, they were about to face a challenge that none of them could have predicted. The children had all moved out of the house, each pursuing their own dreams. Some went to college, others started their own families, and one even pursued a career in medicine, following in Sarah's footsteps of caring for others. Despite their busy lives, the family had always made an effort to stay close, gathering for holidays, birthdays, and special occasions. But something had been different lately. There was a sense of unease in the air, a tension that no one could quite put their finger on. It all began with a phone call to Sarah late one evening. It was from Samuel, the eldest of the 6, the one who had been the most curious about their family's history. He had always been the one to ask questions, to dig deeper into their past. It was no surprise that he had been doing some research into their family origins, but what he discovered would shock them all. "Mom, there's something I need to tell you," Samuel said, his voice trembling. "I found something I didn't expect." Sarah's heart skipped a beat. She had always known that her children were special, but she never imagined that their story held more than what she had shared with them. She asked him to tell her everything. Samuel explained that he had come across some old family records and medical documents that had been hidden away in their attic for years. Documents that detailed the circumstances of their birth, but with some details that didn't quite add up. The more he read, the more questions he had. The documents mentioned something about the children's heritage, something that didn't align with what Sarah had been told. It suggested that their biological connection to her might not be what she had believed it to be. The revelation hit Sarah like a ton of bricks. For 27 years, she had raised these children with all the love and care she could muster. They were her children, her flesh and blood. How could anything in those documents change that? But the more she thought about it, the more she realized that there were gaps in their family history that she had never questioned. Sarah had always known that her family wasn't ordinary, but now she was beginning to question everything. As the days passed, the family began to gather, each of them eager to learn what Samuel had uncovered. They sat together in the living room, the familiar faces of her children now grown, but still carrying the same warmth and affection they had when they were babies. Samuel shared the findings, and what followed was a silence so thick it seemed to fill the room. The documents revealed that Sarah's 6 children were not the result of a natural pregnancy, as she had been led to believe. The truth was that they had been part of an extraordinary scientific experiment, one that had been hidden from Sarah for all these years. The experiment had been designed to study the potential of multiple births, and Sarah had unknowingly been chosen to be the subject. The children were not just the product of her body, they were also part of something much larger, something that had been kept a secret for decades. At first, Sarah couldn't comprehend what she was hearing. How could this be true? She had raised these children, loved them unconditionally. They were hers in every sense of the word. Yet the evidence was irrefutable. It was as if their entire lives had been manipulated from the very start. But as the shock began to wear off, Sarah realized that none of this changed the love she had for her children. They were hers, no matter the circumstances of their birth. They had all come into the world in a way that was beyond anyone's control, but they had made it together, and that was what mattered most. In the weeks that followed, the family began to process the revelation. It was a lot to take in, but as they did, something remarkable happened. They all grew closer. The truth, though painful and unsettling, didn't break them. Instead, it reinforced the strength of the bond they shared. They were a family, built on love, trust, and resilience. No scientific experiment could ever change that. Samuel, who had initiated the search for the truth, was the first to say it aloud. We may not have started like other families, but we're still family, and nothing can change that. The rest of the children nodded in agreement, each of them finding comfort in the realization that their family, despite its extraordinary beginnings, was just like any other. They had faced struggles, challenges, and surprises along the way, but they had always had each other. And that, they knew, was what made them truly special. Sarah, looking at her 6 children, felt a deep sense of peace. It didn't matter how they had come into the world. What mattered was the love they had shared, and the love that would continue to bind them together for the rest of their lives. The unbelievable turn of events had shaken them all, but it also reminded them of the power of family. The journey of Sarah and her 6 children was far from over, and with each new chapter, they would face whatever came their way together. As the weeks passed after the shocking revelation, Sarah and her 6 children found themselves at a crossroads. The discovery about their true origins had left them all stunned. It was a truth no one could have expected. However, what began as an unsettling and painful truth ultimately led to an even more profound understanding of the family's bond. The family had been in turmoil since Samuel uncovered the hidden documents. Some members of the family had been upset, questioning their identity and the very foundation of their lives. The shock of learning they were part of a scientific experiment rather than a typical natural birth was not something that could be easily processed. But in every corner of the house, the one constant that remained was the love they shared. Despite the confusion, despite the unanswered questions, they were a family. And nothing could change that. One chilly evening, as Sarah sat with her children in the living room, a wave of clarity washed over her. She had spent weeks feeling lost, unsure of how to move forward. But as she watched each of her children, now grown into remarkable young adults, she realized something that had eluded her before. It didn't matter where they had come from or how they had come into this world. What mattered most was the love they had for each other, the way they had supported one another through every challenge, and the memories they had created together. "Mom, I know this has been hard for all of us," said Olivia, the second oldest, breaking the silence. She was the quiet one, always observing, but today she had a certain strength in her voice. "But we're still family. We always have been, and we always will be." Sarah looked at her, seeing the maturity in her daughter's eyes, and felt a lump form in her throat. Olivia's words were like a balm to her heart. They were right. They had always been a family, bound not by biology alone, but by love and shared experiences. Their struggles, their triumphs, and their dreams had shaped who they were. No experiment could take that away from them. The family gathered together, each of them coming to terms with their identity in their own way. Samuel, who had been the one to uncover the truth, stood up and addressed the group. "I did what I thought was right. I wanted to know our history, our story. But now I understand something more important. We're all here because of love, not because of a lab. And that's what makes us who we are." Michael, who had remained mostly quiet throughout this ordeal, nodded in agreement. He had always believed in the strength of family, but hearing his children speak so openly gave him a renewed sense of hope. "You're right," he said, his voice steady but full of emotion. "Our past doesn't define us. What matters is what we choose to be now, and what we've built together." As Sarah listened to the words of her children and husband, she felt a profound sense of peace. This was her family. These were her children, her life, and her love. Nothing could change that, no matter how they had come into the world. In that moment, Sarah decided to do something that would seal this newfound sense of unity. She called a family meeting the next day. When everyone gathered around the table, she shared her decision to write a letter. It wasn't a letter to anyone outside of their family, but rather a letter to themselves. It would be a letter they could read in the future, reminding them of this pivotal moment when they decided, together, that their past didn't matter as much as their future. The letter would read, "We are who we choose to be. Our love defines us, not our origins. We are a family because we have always been there for each other, through the hard times and the easy ones. Our strength lies not in what others think, but in the deep bond that holds us together. No matter where we came from, we are bound by the most powerful force in the universe, love. And love will always be our guiding light." As Sarah read the letter aloud, each of her children nodded in agreement. Some had tears in their eyes, some smiled, but all of them felt a deep connection to the words. The truth had hurt, but it had also made them stronger. They had faced an unimaginable challenge, and together, they had come through it. They were no longer defined by the mystery of their origins, but by the love and respect they had for one another. Over the next few months, life slowly returned to a new sense of normalcy. Sarah continued to support her children in their various endeavors, and Michael remained her steadfast partner. Their family was still close, but now there was a deeper understanding between them. They no longer needed to prove anything to anyone. They had each other, and that was more than enough. The 6 children, now adults, had become a force of their own in the world. Each one had forged their own path, but the connection between them was undeniable. They remained close, always checking in with one another, always offering support when needed. And Sarah and Michael, their hearts full, watched with pride as their family continued to grow and flourish. It wasn't the life Sarah had imagined for herself when she first became a mother. It was better. It was fuller. It was richer with meaning, deeper with love. The shocking revelation, though unexpected and difficult, had brought them closer together. They had faced the truth, embraced it, and emerged stronger. In the end, Sarah knew one thing for certain. It was not the circumstances of their birth that mattered, but the love that had surrounded them from the very beginning. And that love, she realized, was the greatest gift of all.